Claudia Webbe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is the second piece of legislation that the government has brought forward this week, which is predicated on breaking international law. It is alarming that this is the global Britain that was promised in such glowing words by the Prime Minister and his allies over the last few years. A Britain which alienates itself on the world stage and which is driven by bluster and tub-thumping from a form of nationalism that endangers both our armed forces and civilians around the globe. The Defence Secretary has boasted about going to war on lawfare, yet preventing acts of torture is not some burdensome red tape. The UK military has opposed torture for decades, and this principle is enshrined in the Army Field Manual and the Ministry of Defence doctrine. Yet the government wishes to provide a triple-lock amnesty which would ensure that acts of torture cannot be prosecuted if they took place more than 5 years ago. This would also enshrine direct political interference from the Attorney General in such cases. Many human rights groups, including Amnesty International, Freedom from Torture, Liberty, Reprieve and Rights Watch UK, strongly oppose this bill on the grounds that it contravenes international humanitarian and human rights law. The organisation Redress warns that the bill risks creating impunity for serious offences, including torture, and therefore will result in the UK being in breach of its international treaty obligations. They say, and I quote, "The bill makes the mistake of assuming that all victims are fake and that the UK armed forces are always in the right. This is not borne out by history. Indeed, it is believed that thousands and thousands of allegations of torture and mistreatment from Iraqis in Afghanis have been lodged against British soldiers serving in the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan." Earlier this year, the International Criminal Court prosecutor determined there is a basis to allegations that the UK armed forces committed war crimes against detainees in Iraq. Yet rather than face up to any wrongdoing, the government now wishes to silence victims by introducing time limits for civil claims in connection with overseas operations. The legislation would also place a duty on all future governments to consider deviation from the European Convention on Human Rights in relation to significant overseas military operations. This reveals what this legislation is truly about: slashing away crucial protections on human rights under the guise of macho patriotism. If we even agree with one of the government's arguments, which is that those involved in controversial overseas operations should not be left in uncertainty for years, yet the solution is not to issue a blanket amnesty for potential war crimes. The solution is for the government to reverse its severe budget cuts. We've got 70 people speaking. The solution is for the government to reverse its severe budget cuts to criminal investigations and to increase accountability and scrutiny over its military intervention. The government claims to be standing up for British troops, yet the erosion of global rules against torture would put UK personnel at risk by endangering British soldiers who are detained by foreign forces overseas. Not only that, but the bill breaches the Armed Forces Convention by preventing British armed personnel from holding the Ministry of Defence to account for negligence, personnel injury or death. Therefore, despite all the government's bluster, this legislation doesn't do much to protect the Ministry of Defence than it does service personnel.
Point of order, Madam Deputy Speaker.
On a point of order, Sir John Hayes.
The Honourable Lady may have inadvertently misled the House, and I wouldn't want her to do that. She made the point just now that this bill meant that serving personnel couldn't be prosecuted for war crimes. That is fundamentally untrue, as the Minister no doubt will confirm. Now, if she could withdraw that remark, I think we could all make some progress.
Sir, I appreciate what the right honourable gentleman is saying, but he knows it's not a point of order for the chair. This is the very point that we are debating.